The swimmer who was leading the nation by body lengths, might I add, was a swimmer that none of us had ever heard of before. Not myself, not my teammates, not my coaches, not my other competitors, not my family, none of us. And this is the first time we became aware of a swimmer named Lia Thomas. This was in November of 2021. And so I see this name, and I'm just kind of confused more than anything. Who is this person? Why have I never heard of them before? I was looking at the facts in front of me. Keep in mind, I hadn't seen a photo of this person or anything like that. Otherwise, I think things would have been a little more clear. But for all I knew at the time, again, a senior, which is very bizarre. No one just comes out of nowhere their senior year. From University of Pennsylvania, which is not a school that has ever produced that level, that caliber of a swimmer. Leading the nation by body lengths and events ranging from the 100 freestyle, which is a sprint, and all of the freestyle events in between through the mile, which is, of course, long distance. And for those who are listening and watching who don't necessarily understand swimming, I mean, think about that last piece in terms of your Olympic runners, because that's like saying your best 200-meter runner is your best marathon runner. It doesn't happen. Those are two totally different systems. But again, that's what we were seeing in this person. And so I'm scratching my head, talking to my coaches, who is this person? We had no idea. And we continued to stay in the dark. I even looked up, there's this database called USA Swimming. So for example, if you were to look up my name, you would see my time progression and my trend line from when I was 8 years old all the way through college. So I'm looking up the name Lia Thomas. There's no history of this person until that season. I'm so confused. And again, we remained confused until an article came out disclosing that Lia Thomas is actually Will Thomas and swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team. And when I read this, I was, of course, we were shocked. We were all shocked. But really, upon reading it, it was like this overwhelming sense of relief. Honestly, it was like, oh,
that explains
well,
it.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. He's a guy. That's why he's dominating. And it was at this point I went to look up on that same database who Will Thomas was. Because again, I was curious. You know, was this a lateral movement? Was this someone who went from ranking amongst the best of the men to now continuing to rank amongst the best of the women? Which is, of course, not what we saw. We saw that this was a mediocre man, and that's generous at best, in the nation the year prior, ranking 554th in the nation when competing against the men in the same event. To, again, now not just number one, dominating the entire country of women. So that's really how I found out who Lia Thomas was. And it was about, you know, the NCAA, they were sitting on the fence for a while, releasing statements. We don't know what we're going to do. Thomas is going to be allowed to compete with the women. They would retract that. They would put the statement back out again. And it wasn't until about 3 weeks before that national championships in March of 2022 that they finally released a statement, an indefinite statement, saying that his participation in the women's category was a non-negotiable, meaning there was nothing that we could do as female athletes. There was no questions that we could ask or concerns that we could raise. We were literally told we had to accept this with a smile on our face.
Explain to me what the NCAA is charged with doing. Who are they as a body of people? How do those people wind up in that position? And what, in your estimation, led them to conclude as they did?
So the NCAA is, of course, the National Collegiate Athletic Association. They are in charge of, they're really, other than the NAIA, the only national collegiate governing body. So they don't just handle swimming. They do all the sports, as you guys know. There are Division I, Division II, Division III. This was the Division I. I mean, it was, like I said, the highest level meet you could achieve. And they had no problem saying, sorry, this is the way this is going to be. Ultimately, abolishing Title IX. I mean, Title IX is the federal civil rights law enacted in 1972, so 52 years ago. that prevented sex-based discrimination on educational programs that receive federal funding. Only 37 words in its original implementation, with one word being activity, which allowed Title IX to be what it was most notable for, which is giving equal opportunity for the sexes in sports. But this action by the NCAA in saying that men and women are the same, they're interchangeable, synonymous, it abolished Title IX. So you ask kind of what made them do this. I have a couple thoughts, and it's something that I honestly, I still struggle with in talking with people who have governing positions, people on the board of governors at the NCAA, even speaking with the president of the NCAA himself. They have said time and time again, we know this is wrong, but our hands are tied. Who's tying your hands? You're the president. So I think a lot of it has to do with money. As I said, I think they were fearful they wouldn't receive federal funding. I think they don't want to be sued. I think the individual universities were terrified of any sort of pushback from a very fringe but loud minority.
Well, they weren't afraid of pushback from you. In fact, what you said before I think is interesting. They told you not only to eat it, to take it, but to do it with a smile on your face. And I don't think you're being hyperbolic. Like they wanted you to be not just okay with it, but enthusiastically okay, supportive of it. Get on the right team, Riley.
Absolutely.
Come on now, right?
No, absolutely they did.
That must have been surreal.
Well, it was. Again, me, a 21-year-old senior in college at the time, I had to go to sensitivity training where they brought in outside professionals, whatever that means, who sat me down, taught me how to use she, her pronouns. It was like a mock interview setting where they would ask me questions. I had to answer the interview questions to their standard. If I didn't, I had to re-go through the training. We were told, you will never get a job again if you speak out about this. Your employer is going to look you up and see that you're a transphobe. And you don't want that, do you? You're never going to get into grad school. You're going to lose all your friends. You'll lose your scholarship and your playing time. Oh, yeah, and Riley, speaking of that scholarship, remember you signed that. And when you signed that scholarship, they said you gave away your rights to speak in your own personal capacity. Because remember who you represent, whose name is across your chest and across your cap, because it's not yours. It's ours. It's our university. And understand we have already taken your stance for you. I could sit here and share accounts and examples of things like that, the threats and intimidation. I mean, the rest of the time that we talk. Thomas's teammates, they had to go to mandatory meetings every single week, of course, provided through the LGBTQ Education Center on campus, to learn about how just by being cisgender, they were oppressing Lia Thomas. When 16 of those girls, his teammates, signed on to an email to UPenn expressing their discomfort in the locker room, some of those girls actually having been sexually assaulted and raped in bathroom settings before, a very traumatic experience for many of them, to see a naked, intact man undressing, where they were also simultaneously undressing. Sent an email to their administration, 16 of them, plus their parents on this email, to which I kid you not, the university responded back with, and I have a screenshot of it. They said, if you feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia, here are some counseling resources that you should seek in an attempt to re-educate yourself. Again, I could go on and on.
It's your problem.
And on.
It's your problem.
Yes.
Right.
That's what they told us.
That, okay, so it seems to me that, like, you're being gaslit, you and your teammates can all see a thing, and you're being told not to acknowledge the thing you're looking at. And you have to get your head around the fact that you're going to compete with Lia Thomas. Was that, well, of course it was different. How different was getting up to speed with that realization to the moment when you realized you would also be sharing a locker room with him?
I'll be honest, going into the meet, I mentioned we found out who he was in November of 2021. that national championships wasn't until March of 2022. So we had about 4 or so months to kind of fester with this idea. What would this look like? And in those 4 months leading up to it, I think back and honestly, I took the approach to this topic of almost thinking it was comical, really. Like it felt like, I mean, I was right. Like it felt like an SNL skit that we were living in. And so those are objectively meant to be funny. And so it just felt like this circus. And I remembered the moment distinctly, where those feelings of intriguement and I'm ashamed to say curiosity almost. I mean, we were curious. Is he going to look as tall as he does in his Instagram pictures? Is he going to change in the locker room? Is he going to, we knew he was going to be competing with us, but is he going to sandbag it to make it look more competitive? I mean, we had so many questions, but I remember the moment distinctly where I was ashamed for ever even remotely laughing, because it was prelims of the 500 freestyle that first day. And this is not an event that I do. And of course, you swim prelims, you have to qualify top 16. You come back that evening for finals. That's where you'll achieve your overall national ranking. So I'm watching prelims on the side of the pool. There was about 8 heats or so in the morning. And so one of the girls from the previous heats, she was from Virginia Tech. Our teams were sat next to each other. She had just got out of the water, just raced. She's watching the final heat swim in the pool. Of course, after this heat finishes, she'll know where she stands in the rankings, if she'll qualify for finals. She's a 5th year. She's from Hungary. I asked her, I'm like, why? We got an extra year of eligibility because of COVID. And I said, why'd you take your 5th year? You've got to be crazy to do that. And she said, well, I wanted to become an All-American. And so I'm standing there
Is this
with
Rika,
her
by the
watching
way?
this. That's her name, Rika.
Yeah.
Watching this with her. And I knew her. I didn't know her that well, though. And that final heat concludes, of course, where Lia Thomas is swimming, where Lia Thomas dominates. The results are posted, and she realized she got 17th. And I will never forget, because she grabbed my hand, looked me in the eye, tears running down her face, and she said, I just got beat by someone who didn't even have to try. And that's when it hit me. What was going on, the severity of what we were dealing with. This wasn't anymore just like a South Park episode. Like, this was reality, and it has real effects on real people. Someone who stayed a whole extra year at college to she set this goal, and she didn't get to achieve that goal at the hands of the NCAA. That's when those feelings shifted to utter heartbreak. And it felt like at that point we had to compete for second place, which again is a feeling I don't like. I don't like having to know. I've never been in a scenario where I knew I wasn't going to win, but this was that for me.
If you like what you heard, and even if you don't, won't you please, pretty please, subscribe. Well, I hate to beg and I hate to plead, but please, pretty freaking please.